My money, 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 my money. You better not be out there spending all my money. You said you're going to Macy's, but with my money? You shouldn't be going anywhere. You owe me money. The bitch knew that I'd be back. She knew that I want my money. Yeah.
Did you all enjoy that? That was from my home girl, my home skillet, Dominique Devereaux Regalia, with her hit single, My Money, i.e. me, if you're wondering. I just wanted to welcome you all to the very first official episode of Off Key with J Red. I know, right? It's exciting. This particular episode, I wanted to talk about family, specifically the family experience growing up as a black gay male. I found it real interesting just from my experiences and everything that I learned about just humanity. I come from a family that is faith-based, and we relatively were more close-knit than the average family. Growing up, I could really much look to my cousins as, closer than cousins. They were almost like siblings to me, like extended siblings. We would spend so much time together. We would spend the night at each other's houses. We were just very close, and it wasn't, my extended family didn't feel very extended. It felt very primary to me. I felt like not only did I have my mother, my father, and my immediate siblings, I also had aunts and uncles that were like, additional parents. So I was very, very close and attached to my family. And I think growing up, being an 80s baby and growing up in the 90s, as young children, we were exposed to a lot of sex on TV, if I can be very frank. I think that the movies back then, it almost feels like the 90s was more of a woke decade or more of a free decade than it is now. And I think that we're so much more sensitive about things now than we used to be. I think that we can make a dark joke, we can expose a titty, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal back in the 90s versus now. It has to be all this context that has to be reviewed before you put something on TV, which I think has its positives, but I think some negatives too, because I just feel like the truth has been lost just about people's feelings about things because we're so focused on being politically correct. But that's a whole different topic. Anyway, so I am a child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was young. If I was to guess the age, I was probably around anywhere between maybe 5 or 7. I think they were even separated even when I was even younger. So my reality is I've always known my parents to be separated. I didn't really see, I don't really have recollections of my parents being together outside of just seeing pictures. And it was volatile for a lot of that demise of that relationship. Both my parents are pretty sensitive, both my mother and my father. So I was doomed in that regard. Of course, I've gotten different versions of it as to why they were separated, but I won't even divulge into that because I feel like only they can really tell their stories. I was given secondhand knowledge about it, but I know that for an extent of my childhood, my father, unlike in a lot of instances, my father was my primary parent. And for the most part, I guess you can say that he did the best that he could. But I think he was the kind of man that as long as the bills were paid, that was the biggest thing. As far as like our emotional development, I think because he was so arrested in his own right, as far as like emotionally, psychologically, if that's even a word, psychologically, mentally, like don't get me wrong, my dad is a very intelligent person, but I think that there's definitely, it's been revealed to me that a lot of the development as far as interpersonal relationships, conflict resolution, diplomacy, he's just not, it's not his strength, if I can just be frank. So with that being said, I just feel like me and my older sister was kind of left in the wilderness in that regard. My dad did get married, remarried to a woman who I would say was not a perfect woman by any means, but later down the line, I am very grateful to her to have stepped into a situation where it just wasn't always comfortable. Luckily, I was a male, because I think that female energy with her and my older sister, it wasn't always kosher. And I think that that's a female thing, I think, because I know women energy is just different, especially when you're dealing with a stepmother and a stepdaughter. It can be very volatile. It can be volatile just with step-parents in general, but especially amongst women, I can only imagine what that dynamic is like. But anyway, moving forward, yeah, my mom and dad didn't always get along. And then when my mother did re-enter our lives, that was also an adjustment too. So there was a lot of pivotal years in my youth that I feel like I didn't really have a strong sense of self. I was always smart in school. That's all I knew about myself, is I was smart. I knew that I was kind of different because of I think the typical boy things that typical boys gravitate to, like sports, girls. It just wasn't really for me. I was more so like into art. I was into writing. I was into music. Whitney became my icon when I was very, very young. She just reminded me of someone that I knew. She reminded me a lot of my aunt, even though as an adult, I realized they were two different kind of people, but I guess that grace that she exuded just reminded me so much of the women in my family. So that was right there, just being a Whitney fanatic. I should have known that I was a little sissy, but anyway, moving right along. So I think that kind of shaped who I was, as far as not really having anyone there to kind of direct me. Now, mind you, I had extended family members. My aunt, she was very pivotal during that time where my parents weren't really on the same page. She was very pivotal as far as like securing me and my sister during that time. She brought security to us. But of course, for any child, they want their mama and their daddy, especially that mama. We want our parents. We need to be grounded under our parents. So I think with that in the midst, I just felt like I didn't really have the strongest foundation, but I was secured as a kid. I was safe as a kid. And I think that's the biggest thing. So moving right along, when it comes down to coming out, I think I was kind of forced out. I got sick, I think, with strep throat when I was in high school. I think I was a junior in high school. I had strep throat. Now, mind you, leading up to this, I had a few run-ins, with boys. And to be very transparent, it started with a family member. I wouldn't classify it as rape. I would not classify it as rape. I would classify it as curiosity. Again, when your kids growing up in a very sexualized culture, and no blame to my parents, but we weren't really restricted too much about what we could watch. A lot of the cult black movies that came out during the 90s, it did have a strong sexual element to it. So as children, especially becoming preteens, you become very curious about what sex is, especially when you start feeling new sensations. So considering that, I had experience with a family member, and then I moved on to liking boys. I had my first little experience with a guy that I met, I believe, online. I don't even know if BGC was out at that time. I forget on what platform we met.
Black Planet.
But we met, and I guess we called ourselves kind of together. I would sneak and be on the phone late nights trying to talk to boys and connect, because I didn't really have anybody to really connect with. I was such an outsider. I was so different. I couldn't really find anyone to really connect with. So I guess within this community, I found some commonality, and I felt some kind of sense of belonging. I think that's the reason why I ran towards that. So when I first had my first official boyfriend, I was in high school. He was in college, and I kind of was outed because it was still a secret. I haven't told anybody. But when I got ill, like with strep throat, my dad had went through my room, and he had found a letter that my college boyfriend had wrote me as he was leaving town for the summer. And that's pretty much how I got outed. My dad, I guess you can say, he staged an intervention. My stepmother had passed away at that time. I knew that I had an advocate in her. She never knew exactly that I was gay, but I had a sense that she kind of knew, because we had developed a kinship when she became sick with cancer. I think that's what created this closer bond between us. I think in a way, it kind of let down her guards as a stepmother, and she just started looking to me as a child, as her child specifically. And I looked to her as a mother figure, and we became very close. So she was a source that I felt like would have been very good for me as far as advocacy is concerned. Because when my dad had called my mother and my aunt to come over, it was pretty much hell and brimstone at that point. I was told how wrong I was. I had created this narrative about it where I said that this was a boy that liked me. I didn't really know how to respond to it. I kind of played it off. But, from then on, I think it was aware by my father, my mother, and my aunt that, I was kind of wrestling with these feelings. Because they were faith-based, and because they were just doing what they have been told and what the Bible says, I didn't really find advocacy in them, because it was just something that just couldn't understand. So I can't say that I had any strong supporters in my family. I mean, in modern day, I have my sisters, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was something that they advocated for me. It was something that just kind of accepted, because I know with conflict that's going on right now in my family, I don't really sense that they speak up for me or defend me or try to protect me in any kind of way. They accepted me for sure. But advocacy, I feel like, is just so important, for someone, a black male, coming into his own, trying to figure everything out. It's so essential to have that advocate. Now, growing up, I didn't have a lot of references as to what my family felt about homosexuality outside of it being biblically wrong. There wasn't a lot of faggots and, oh, he gay, and demeaning in that way. I know that one time when I was younger, I had worn my jacket around my waist. I had tied it around my waist. And my dad was very concerned about that because he equated the way that I wrapped my jacket around my waist as gay. And he had talked to me about that. And looking back on it, it's just so funny because I just feel like there's so much fear, just like racism. It's so much fear behind the unknown, you know, and I try to give my family grace when it comes to our current conflicts because I understand that a lot of it, they just can't really understand. You can only give grace. For a lot of people, you can only give grace to things that you understand. And I get that. Not make it taken up for them, but I just have an understanding about it. Fast forward, I just kind of want to get through this. Fast forward to today, my family we're not at the best space, to be very honest. For most of my adulthood, I was never really in relationships. So although my family did know about my sexuality, there was nothing that was actively discussed because I didn't have a partner, I didn't have a boyfriend to really, you know, put it in their face like that. Over recent years, I was in a relationship, or I am in a relationship, and I think that's when hell kind of broke loose in the fact of that now it was in their face. And now I get to hear what they really felt about it. You know, my aunt told me that she was gonna jump up from tables if I was to invite my partner to family events. You know, my mom before she told me that HIV and AIDS were punishments for the lifestyle, you know, and she still says, although she denies saying that, I know her stance right now is that she still feels like it's wrong. She still doesn't really agree with it. She's in a space where now she's trying to tolerate it. And even that toleration of it feels cruel in the sense of you're trying to make room for something instead of just embracing somebody for who they are. And when you try to make room for something, you know, it's a discomfort. It doesn't add to your I guess convenience. And I sense that all the time. It's always like, ugh, you know, it's always like they have to make room for me, and they're not always successful. And in a lot of family dynamics, a lot of family conflict, I'm always told how wrong I am. And I always wonder, you know, when it comes to matters between my siblings or matters with my family where we may not agree, am I always deemed so wrong, or is it easy to deem me wrong? Because I'm already a fag. So of course, you know, this person's just gonna be wrong by nature. I find that kind of interesting. And also, my father's new wife, his third wife, had took me to court, and over some bullshit. If I can be very, very honest, you know, we had a very heated discussion over the phone through text messaging, and I just voiced a lot of things that I didn't really appreciate over the years. And she then took that to a sheriff and then added to it that I was calling her at all hours of the night, which is not true, to create this narrative that I was harassing her. So they sent the sheriff to my job looking for me. I had to go to court. They were awarded a stay of protection where I had to stay a distance from her for almost half the rest of the year through into the following year. And I was angry with her, don't get me wrong, but I was more so angry with my father that he sat there and allowed all that to happen and advocated for this to happen. And then again, it made me think, okay, because I'm gay, you know, am I a throwaway? I still struggle with that. So, I mean, the family dynamics when you're gay, especially in the Black experience, stereotypically has not gone well for me. Stereotypically. To my family's credit, I love them dearly. I think that they have been my lifeline in a lot of other ways, a lot of other aspects. If I ever needed something monetarily, financially, or just something in the physical sense, I know that, you know, a lot of people will come to my aid. But emotionally, I just find it so curious how, coming from a family that was so close knit, how we don't know really how to talk to each other. We don't really know how to really communicate with each other. We don't know how to be emotionally honest and transparent with each other. I feel like we're still very guarded. And in those conflictive moments, we elicit this nice, nasty tactic that I blame directly on the church. Because church taught us how to fake it until we make it. Church has taught us how to smile in the midst of adversity and act like everything's okay. It teaches us pageantry in a lot of ways. And I feel like it doesn't really teach us how to have real deal conversations with each other. I feel like we're always placating each other. We're not really being real and honest with each other. We're not. I love my family. I really, really do. And I really hope that we could get to a better place. But it is what it is right now. And I'm learning to accept, you know, where we are now. Because that's the best thing I know how to do, just for my personal mental health. You know, I rack my brain about what I could do, what I could say, how to show up that would make things easier for everybody. But at the same time, what about me? I have to show up for myself and what's peaceful and free for me. And I hate that it ruffles feathers, but it really is what it is at this point. Although I'm in conflict with a sister of mine, I'm in conflict with extended family of mine right now, I still love everybody. But I can't help but wonder if that alienation, if that conflict, if that fight has been kept up and prolonged for such a time, because I am gay, and because I am disposable, because I'm not someone that's really valued, because, oh, I'm just a gay brother, oh, I'm just a gay son, oh, I'm just a gay cousin. You know, I'm a Scorpio. I put my heart on the line. I'm someone who was very clear and direct about, you know, my feelings and what my disposition is regarding certain subjects. And I feel like a lot of times it just gets dismissed. So for all of my fellow gay butch queens out there, what I would say to you is, when it comes to your family, love them, but don't live for them. Love them, but don't live for them. Live for yourself. Put your own happiness at the forefront. This life is way too short to really be focusing on what anybody feels about you. Either somebody loves you or they don't. I know as human beings, people say that, oh, it's more nuanced than that. Some of that I believe, some of it I don't. Either you love me or you don't. I'm black and white in that way, maybe to my detriment. If you was to ask my boyfriend, I'm sure he would agree, but we won't go there. Love you, babe. But yeah, either you love somebody or you don't. And in such a time as this, I'm choosing to love ferociously, compassionately. I choose to just love. And as a human being, as a very flawed human being, I think that's the best thing that we can do, is just love each other. That's the legacy I want to leave, is love. I thank you all so much for your time. I thank you so much for listening and coming to my space and really connecting with me. I do not take that for granted as I'm approaching this new journey of life of just really being, just trying to connect. So that wraps up this episode of Off Key with J Red. Just to let you know, probably future episodes, I might be a little bit more jovial. It might be a little bit more funny, a little bit more relaxed. But this was an episode I knew that I need to be in the most right mind that I can be, because it's a very serious subject. But anyway, thank you so much. Until next time, get your kiki on.